Welcome back to another episode with your Vitruvian coaches. Today, we are going to discuss advanced training methods and take you through some concepts that we've worked through or that we know of and utilize with clients. So, strap in and make sure that you learn how to take the most out of your training. One of the first methods that we are going to discuss is probably pretty straightforward. So, it's periodization training. If you haven't heard about it, it is when you build up in a linear progress and you want to do progressive overload with your training, which we should be aware of because that's probably one of the easiest ways to increase your strength training or increase muscle building, because we always want to add either more reps, more load if you can, unless you need a deload week because you've worked too hard. But technically, you want to find some ways to increase your load or increase your rep range so that we are making progress. Because if you are someone that picks up 2 kilo with dumbbells every single training session, you're probably leaving a lot on the table there.
Unless you're doing a lot of reps to try and hack the progressive overload. 100. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's where people fall into a bit of a rut there when they're trained from home and you only have limited equipment and you want to do progressive overload, then you literally end up doing like 30 reps, 35, 50, 100, because eventually if you don't have any weight and you can't slow down your tempo anymore, because that's another option, slowing down tempo. Where do you go from there? Like you just have to add more reps or do single leg and single arm exercises.
I feel like it was definitely that way for lockdowns over the pandemic that, feels like a lifetime ago. It's crazy that it was that long ago. But yeah, with the limited amount of equipment or like hack equipment that anyone could find, I definitely did a few tempo pauses, and I think it got to the point where you had to go on Facebook Marketplace and see if you could buy any more equipment off anybody else, because you just couldn't do any more tempo work unless you were willing to spend 2 hours maybe trying to do a session. How about you guys? What did you guys try and hack over that time period?
During that period, I was someone who impulse bought a lot of overpriced equipment. So I did try to buy a barbell and then random plates, and I have a random 65-pound dumbbell, and yeah, it was kind of a Frankenstein of a gym set up in my mom's backyard. Uh, but yeah, definitely there was a certain point in terms of load where I could go to, and then it all came down to just increasing the volume. So more reps, more sets. And then eventually I just completely fell off the wagon and I didn't train for like a year. Um, so now we got the comeback.
Yeah, I my goal in lockdown was to get a handstand, so I would focus on something else and like learn how to do a handstand. Didn't last very long, but I was also one of the lucky ones where my ex-partner used to have a gym that he closed and he still had all the gym equipment, so I had first dips, and I was like this and this and this all in the backyard. So me and my housemate were trying to know our backyard. I have videos of this, and that was just before I started my powerlifting journey. So it's the first time I've had like a powerlifting coach, and I'm actually surprised that Callan used to let me lift like this. And I would like rack the barbell on like two high chairs because I didn't have a squat rack for a while because it took the boys too long to build it up and I wasn't able to build it up. So, and I remember that I crashed under it once. Like it was definitely not a good time. And it was just before Vitruvian had machines available. And because we only had like 5 machines in the world, I wasn't allowed to take one home. So I had to either train at work or train with my weird gym setup in the back. And it used to get really hot over here. Like the garden sessions became a lot more sweaty. Or on the other hand, when it was like cold, it was so cold outside. We would rock up in like beanies and whatnot and then train at the back. And then with clients, I had to be super creative, like backpacks with books and wine bottles. I remember one of my clients posted a video of her in front of the TV doing like lateral raises with like wine bottles. I'm like, yeah, sums up lockdown for me.
I managed to get a 20 kilo dead ball just filled with sand. And I remember that gave me an idea. I was like, oh, it's just a bowl filled with sand. And so hardware stores were still open here. And I was like, I'm going to go to Bunnings over here in Australia. I'm going to buy sand. I'm going to buy like, um, I don't even know what these are called, like furniture, strappy things. And I was going to hack myself a handle. And it was a disaster. I think we ended up throwing away a whole lot of hardware or giving it away because we were just trying to hack just about anything just to keep some sort of progressive overload in some sort of way.
When it comes to programming, how do you guys program the progressive overload? Like, how do you have a go-to template? Because I know I certainly do, but I want to know what you guys do.
Oh, so what I'm doing at the moment, I am at a stage where I adjust according to, sets, reps, and load a little bit. So right now I'm going through a bit more of a muscular endurance bout. So everything I'm doing is around 15 to 20 reps a set, which is really hard for me because I don't do anything more than 6 or 8 reps at a time. Which is also really interesting because the weight that I thought that I would have to put on the bar in order to get that amount of reps, it's actually a little bit more than I thought it would be. I first started off with 50%, and that seemed quite comfortable, so that was really interesting. And then right now I'm sitting at 65% for 15 reps, like still quite hard aerobically, but it's quite fun in a weird way. And then I thought the other day I'm going to do a quick calculation of volume because I was just really curious to see, because the other day I did a bit of a deadlift party just because I thought, like, I like lifting heavy and going quite close to sub max, if not max load. So, and I think I'd been doing endurance for a long time. So I just got a bit, I was like, I'm just over this. I want to do a 1RM. Yeah, and in terms of 1RM, managed to push past my PB, and then did a quick calculation of the volume, so sets multiplied by reps multiplied by the load, and I was doing way more load, obviously, volume over the last 2 months than I usually would do lifting sub max. So yeah, I don't really pay attention to the numbers too much, but I think I've trained long enough to know when I'm doing way more volume than I usually do.
I think that's a great point too. Different phases in our lives, probably we have different training styles or different templates that we adhere to. I'd say I probably have erred on like the hypertrophy range versus ever really going for a like true 1 rep max. And I would say a lot of my programming now it'll fluctuate a bit. I'd say for my main lifts, it's going to be that like 753 where the intensity for each lift is going to change week on week. But to get the volume for hypertrophy, I'm always sitting in that like 8 to 20 rep range. If I see Casey put over 20 reps, I like give him a mean glare from across the room because he knows I won't do it. So I would say it's if I had to defer to a certain structure, that's probably the primary structure. And then obviously changing some variables here and there depending on time of the year. Like right now, going through a build phase. So like my calories are way, way, way higher than they usually are. I have a lot more, I guess, technically energy that I can use. So like volume is higher than it normally would be. And probably as that tapers down, volume will taper down slightly. But always, I guess, keeping that structure and progressing with load as well.
How much Chipotle are you eating right now to try and get through?
I mean, they see me walking and they know it's already ready for me. So
This is great. I think for me, when it comes to programming for a client and they're a beginner client, I usually give them a rep range. And then I work with RPEs quite a bit. So if it's a new client, I tell them 10 feels like you're hit by a truck. 1's super easy. 5 is pretty manageable. You can probably go up. And then teach them how weights feel like that way. And then in the rep ranges, it might be like 10 to 12 or 8 to 10 or 12 to 15. And once they feel like they can go to 15 and that still feels less than an 8, then I get them to increase the weight. And that's how we progressively overload and like build a little bit of like, I don't know, number literacy around training literacy and how weights feel and how they should be feeling. And that's what I would usually do for clients. And then for myself, it's probably more lower rep ranges, so 1 to 5 for my big lifts, and they are all programmed based on my 1RM. And at the moment, or deadlifts, I'm actually doing 6 reps on my back offsets, but only three, 6, 6. So we're increasing the reps now, and that's been actually quite fun. And I'm same as you, Christine. I'm surprised that I can rep the weights pretty high compared to what I thought. Like I probably do reps around like 70-75% at the moment, which is cool. And then for accessories, it's more like a bit of a gamble. How does it feel? How gassed out am I from my previous big lifts? And that's where they are in higher rep ranges, probably 10 to 12, but I wouldn't go above 20. I think the only exercise I go 15 is abductions and cable kickbacks. That's 15, and that's probably the highest I've had in a long time.
Yeah, I think the only time that I've ever done anything beyond 20 reps is if I'm forced to do it in like a Metcon or something. But
yeah, watch out for the Metcon that I have planned for 21 reps.
well, I think I purposefully don't program beyond 20 because I can barely even count to 10. I definitely have to cut them up into chunks in order to get through a higher rep range. So right now with 15, I have to count to 5, and then count again to 5. And mentally, I'm like, okay, that's 1 set of 5, 2 sets of 5, 3 sets of 5, and then that's how I can get to 15 successfully in my head.
This is such a pity sickness. But I do this running. So, you know, when you run and you're like, okay, 2 more 10 minutes, then I'm done. All right, 3 more this and 3 more that, and then I'm done. And then that's how I do and psych myself up through running. Otherwise, I can't do it. It's like broken down. I'm like, all right, 1 more minute, 60 seconds, another one. We can do this, another 60 seconds.
That is all cardio. It's like, okay, I only have to do 2 minutes 20 times. And
okay, that sounds like way too much. It probably sounds off-putting.
yeah, it's 2 minutes 20 times, or I can listen to this one song 8 times, and I just break it down however my mind.
I do this thing where I feel like I'm not really present. I'm not in the moment. Maybe for the first 3 quarters, I just look at, pace or anything. I use those kind of numbers to set myself a target. And then when I know that I'm close to the end of something, that's when I start like a mental countdown. That's when I start saying, okay, there's only this much left. There's only this much left. Whereas like the first 3 quarters, I'm not even going to think about how long this is going to take or how much I don't really want to do this. I'm just looking at something else. That's so funny.
That's probably a good way to do it. And this is totally off topic, but have you guys seen on TikTok the girl maths thing? It's hilarious. And this is reminding me of like we're doing the math for our running and our cardio, but it's basically in New Zealand radio show justifying girls' purchases, and the way they calculate it, it's called like girls' math. And it's like someone bought, I don't know, $700 dress, and she's like, well, I've got 3 weddings or 4 weddings to go to. So they're like, well, per wedding, it's only going to be like $100 dress, and then you can wear it another time for a work function. You can rent it out to your friends. So basically, you're making money, and the dress was free. And I do this for everything. And the boys in his radio show are just like, what the heck? And I was like, well, not that I have done it like this before, but I definitely have justified some purchases like that. Or there was a girl getting Taylor Swift tickets, and she had to fly to Sydney, I think, from New Zealand. And they were like, well, that's good because you're saving like 30 grand. Otherwise, if you couldn't have gotten the tickets for Sydney, you would have had to fly to Austria, and that would have been way more expensive. So really, you're saving money then. I'm like, great, this is totally justified. So this is me doing cardio. I'm trying to tell myself mathematically what I have to go through, that it's less bad.
I feel like that's me with high reps or anything that's aerobic in general, I think.
Okay, since this group is not a fan of high reps, let's talk about like the super low reps. So we're talking like 1 to 3. What does that look like? Because again, objectively, we can't always be working at a 1 rep max. We're not doing a 1 rep max every single day. It it just wouldn't happen. That number would change constantly if that's what you were trying to do. So maybe you can talk to that lower rep range, when to do it, how often to do it, and if that is your goal, how to make progress towards it.
Yeah. Do you want me to start, Christine?
I feel like you just did your comp, so I feel like this is a natural segue for your story.
Yeah, technically, when I work with my coach around it, we look at the ultimate goal on the end of the block. So let's say I want to hit, I don't know, 130 kilo on my deadlift. I'm like, cool. That's going to be like week 6, and that's where we're testing strength. But I will still do 1 reps of a deadlift or a squat in the lead up, but I just won't go to the highest intensity. So it might be like 80%, 90%, 95% until I then or go over my 1 rep max. So in the last block, for example, we would do, that was a 6-week block, I think. So the first 4 weeks were probably, I don't know the exact numbers, but they're probably like around 90-95%. Then week 4 was 2 weeks away from the meet. So I tested my strength there and I went 2 kilos above my previous max. And that felt pretty easy. So I don't think it was like a 10 RPE. And then the next week after, we tapered back because it was the week before the comp. And then on the comp, you obviously try and go for your new PB. So you're going above your 100%. And that worked. So that's good. But then in the lead up, I was still doing 1 rep for my top set. But then you do your warm up sets and then you do your back off sets. And I actually had someone ask me what back off sets are the other day. So the way I program, like there's different ways you can program for powerlifting or strength gains, but I quite enjoy doing warm-up sets, then have like the top set and then backing it off and get more volume in that way. Another way would be that you're just doing the warm-up sets and you're finishing on your hardest set, and that's probably something I would do for like hip thrusts or something more than for my squats and deadlifts. Or if it's a new client or if it's a session where you don't have as much time, because by the time I get through my squats and my deadlifts and my bench, like half an hour or an hour is gone because I'm building up and then backing off. But yeah, so I would do like 1 rep for the top set and then back it off with like 3 reps or 2. And then every now and then do the 3 and then go 5 or 7 and to get more volume in. And that percentage will then drop and we don't go as high. But yeah, you're right. You can't do your 1 rep max every single week. You're going to gas yourself out. So I think it's about like probably like 80 to 90% where I usually train within training and then building it up every training's block. But even then, not every training's block I'll finish with a PB at the end of it. It just depends where you are. And then maybe you need a deload. For females as well, it depends on where you are in your menstrual cycle and all those things. So taking all that into consideration is probably really important.
Yeah, when I was still competing or thinking about competing, we would just know the dates of certain comps, and then obviously the rest of my build phase, testing phase, was all surrounded around that. But I haven't really done any competing maybe in about a year. And so over the last year or so, I've just been mainly working on building, dare I say, like some bodybuilding type stuff here and there. I think my goals for the last 12 months have just been to kind of keep the lights on a little bit. So just keep the routine going, keep doing the skill work, keep doing some drills, But yeah, what I'll tend to do is put myself through either a build phase or an endurance phase for maybe like 3 months at a time, and then at the end of that, like I'll work towards a strength like block for maybe like 6 weeks just to ramp myself up to testing, and then I'll see what the last 3 months of work have really done, just for my own curiosity and just to see like what kind of adaptations I'll have, and so that's how I've been chipping away over the last year or so, without any full structured programming that's geared towards competing. How about you, Nix?
To be honest, very similar in the sense where I've had, again, I mentioned like I kind of fell off from probably closer to a year and a half, like after the pandemic. And then a lot of the training I was doing was, I guess, to keep the lights on or to just kind of get back into the routine. So just showing up was a win. Doing any kind of lifting was a win at that point. So it wasn't super structured. I'd say I've been training with Casey like over a year now. And since we've started, I think that gave me the structure that I was not giving myself, which definitely helps. And during that time, like we've obviously had multiple blocks. And, my goal, I'd say most of the time is hypertrophy, but again, with strength progression as well. So again, we're not necessarily ramping up for a specific number, but each block is a little bit of a build in terms of like numbers as well. Um, but again, similar to what you mentioned, there will be some blocks where the rep count will go down. So maybe I am closer to like 3 to 8 for a lot of things, and there isn't a lot of like accessory volume, so that I can focus on those lifts on those days. Whereas right now, my volume is very, very high. So I'd say for my main lifts, we're still, like, again, we are at like that 3 to 7, but like everything outside of that, there's a lot more work. Hope that answers it. Okay. So a little bit of everything sometimes.
And do you have any advanced lifting techniques that you really enjoy? Like we covered a little bit of supersets and pyramid sets, but personally for me, one of my favorite, and I only do that for accessories and probably like tricep and biceps because there's no way I'll train biceps on a regular bicep training basis because I think it's too boring. But I love like a rest pause method, um, where you go do as many reps as you can, then rest for 10 to 15 seconds, and then do as many reps as you can again and really gas yourself out. But you can only really do that on like safe exercises or cable exercises where you've got more stability. But I think I really enjoy those for your abductions, um, biceps and triceps, and that's one of my favorites. Do you've got any others that you enjoy? They're like cruel things. They're almost a love-hate relationship, but they get the job done.
I just posted actually in our Facebook group as well, but it's a finisher. It's bicep curls for time, skull crushers, and then lateral raises. And you run that through 4 times, 45 seconds on, just trying to get as many reps as you can, and then 15 seconds off.
Yeah, fun.
It's disgusting.
It's brutal. So I'd say, yeah, things like lateral raises I would do as well in that scheme that you mentioned, or any kind of like shoulder raises. Anything that isn't like a military or like strict press.
Yeah.
Typically, when I was doing a lot more Olympic lifting training wise prior to this 1 year off it, you tend to do like a lot of drills that mix in a few different components. So between like pulls, a full clean, there's so many different combos into the one set, and that would be that would be quite taxing aerobically, but obviously you're trying to continue to produce as much power as you can while you're slowly starting to get fatigued per set. But yeah, I don't think I've ever really done a full bodybuilding type, advanced lifting style where you do your drop sets or supersets, until maybe just recently. One thing that you tend to miss out on when you're doing a lot of Olympic lifting is any sort of bench press or chest presses. Um, and since my year off, and I've been training a little bit more traditional bro splits, I've been doing a lot more bench, which has been quite interesting. And I think maybe 3 months ago, I did my first ever drop set, and that's just I don't actually want to do that ever again, and I'd actually won't. I just especially I was like, I don't care for that kind of stuff, but that it was a really interesting experience. I don't care to build my chest or anything like that, but um, yeah, how people are able to do drop sets for a whole block, uh, you know, all the power to you. That stuff is disgusting. I'd rather do a metcon if I'm honest.
Well, see, I'd be the opposite. Like, give me a drop set, but don't give me a metcon.
Oh, no way. I think metcon. I don't know what it is. I think I can switch off mentally and emotionally. Same thing, like remove myself from the moment a little bit. Whereas I feel like with drop sets, there's just so much to think about. Um, like, in terms of your form, or it depends on what you're drop setting, to be honest. But yeah, for a compound lift like that, it was just so hard to just think of everything and then also get yourself through the count. And then there's a lot going on, I feel, that you have to focus more on. So yeah, credit to all those bodybuilders.
I would definitely keep those drop sets and training to failure for my accessory lift, unless I'm going for a 1 rep max test, because that's technically training to failure, but with just a lot less volume. But going to cover training to failure, what are your thoughts of training to failure? For myself, I probably use it, like I said, in like accessory moves and stable exercises. So I wouldn't necessarily go squat train to failure unless I had someone spotting me and it is a comp. Um, and that's only for 1 rep. I'm not maxing out my squat for a couple of reps. And then I probably have trained to failure accidentally when when I wasn't meant to, because I failed to lift. But technically, if I plan to trial to failure, it's probably more like your accessories, your tricep extensions, glute kickbacks, and things like that. What about you?
I think it's important to also like we can differentiate between failure. So you have your absolute or mechanical failure. This is like you couldn't lift this if your life depended on it. That's like the absolute failure. And then you also have technical failure. So this is going to be when at the point where your form starts to break down, and they're not always the same thing. So maybe you can speak to this as well, like when your sport is meant to be pushing yourself to get the heaviest load that you can, there may be maybe a rep where the technique starts to break down, but you do that to get to that number, if that makes sense. So for instance, maybe you get to your point of absolute failure, but your last rep, the form was breaking down, but you still happen to get it up. That would probably be your point of technical failure. Um, for me personally, because I'm not in a sport where I need to hit that number, I would say I rarely, never. I think sometimes Casey like wants me to, or he's like, come on, let's do it. And I'm like, no, I rarely would ever train to like absolute failure, but I will get to like the point of like technical failure. So maybe like 2 to 3 reps before I'm at that absolute point. For me personally, I'm not a spring chicken. I've had injuries. I have injuries right now. So the closer you get or the more you push past that technical failure point, one, sometimes you can start practicing maybe improper technique, but also you are increasing the risk of injury. But again, not saying this is totally my own opinion and like what I do, because maybe you are in a sport and you're like, I actually need to be able to get to that place or be able to push past this certain point, then yeah, you're probably going to push past that place if you need to. So um, just me just chiming in, totally subjective.
Yeah, I agree with you. There is a difference in terms of training to failure, whether it's mechanical failure, technical failure, or um, muscular failure, if you want to call it that. I don't tend to train to failure too often. I just, my central nervous system just doesn't, it needs to have time off almost. I need to make sure that I have no social things that are like social obligations. I've got to make sure that, you know, my stress management is like outside of training is very much on point. Because yeah, the first thing that kind of goes down the drain for me is my mood regulation. As soon as like my central nervous system starts to go. So I don't do it too often. And I don't do every single type of training to failure. It'll just usually be like, you know, max load, like here and there once in a while, and that'll be a cool thing, but that's about it. Yeah, my body just doesn't handle it very well. My body handles it well, but I think the rest of me mentally doesn't handle it very well afterwards if I'm doing that way too much. And I definitely found that when I was doing CrossFit 5 days a week a few years back. I found myself at a stage where I couldn't really go every day to do the WOD, and I had to start breaking it up with days in between, because I just wasn't my best. Maybe after 3 days of just that kind of annihilation to myself. And there's probably some other things that I could have done better, like, you know, recovery, sleep, and nutrition that would have maybe helped me sustain that kind of energy. But I'm not an elite athlete. I'm not competing for the games or anything. So that to me just didn't make sense, to just continue doing that to myself.
I think that's a really important point, to listen to your body and also listen to recovery with all those methods, and make sure that you're not frying your nervous system endlessly, because if you have a lot on your plate already, then that's really, the training benefit kind of outweighs the actual life situation. If you're already super stressed, then don't put extra stress on top of it with the training, because in the end of the day, training is still also a stressor. So you just want to make sure that you've got some balance with all of it. When it comes to equipment, what equipment do you guys use? Because I know I have all the equipment, and then I all got stolen. And now I had to get all my new equipment again, because it's actually really interesting. Obviously I use my sleeves and my belt for my squats, and then I didn't have them. And when I'm on holiday, I usually don't take them. And it feels fine because I drop my weight when I'm on holiday, and I don't pretend I can lift as much as I am in the gym. But then when I was here prepping for the comp and I didn't have my sleeves and my belt, my squats literally looked totally different. They felt totally different. They didn't work. And it's probably partly like mental and being frustrated, but it just made such a difference to not using the belt and my sleeves. And usually I only use belt and sleeves on my primary days and not on my accessory days. So I can keep, like, I don't know, just some function without them. And now I've like, nah, screw this. I'm just going to use them all the time. It's going to makes you live so much better. It feels so much better.
Yeah, I have a belt I'll only really use when I'm testing. I don't usually use it in work outside of testing or strength building. But knee sleeves have been something that I've had to slowly. I used to hate knee sleeves. I just they're awkward, and if like you have leggings on, they're even more awkward. It's not great.
Put on. It's a nightmare. It's almost harder than a workout.
And if it's a hot day, because where I train, it's not a temperature regulated place. It's very much just in a warehouse in the elements. So whatever the weather is, that's the weather. And if it was like a hot day, trying to get them on while your legs are sweaty is also a vibe. But in the last 2 years, I had to start wearing them, especially like in the cold, because my joints were just a little bit more happy. But lifting whenever it was really, really cold. But yes, straps are also a big one, especially for doing heavy pulls. Yeah, I think that's about. And chalk. Chalk is like the most underrated thing in the world, but chalk is a lifesaver. It's a staple in my gym bag.
Yeah, I can agree on the chalk, on the straps. I have worn a belt before, but it's been years. I don't. I actually have like a breath belt, which is like, I consider it like different. It's like less compression, and it's more as like, ironically, I don't actually use it when I'm lifting. Sometimes I just use it because like my brace is such like, it's so trash that I just like just breathe with it on just to practice like proper bracing, and that'll be its own thing. Um, and then other than that, I've never worn knee sleeves. I've never tried them. I've never had a pair. So can't personally relate on that one. When I was, this is so long ago, when I was skating though, like whenever it was like super old school, we just take a ton of like athletic tape and just like wrap like the ankles or like the whatever we needed extra support on. It was just like, I was just held together by athletic tape for many years. Um, and maybe, I don't know if this is still on topic, but in terms of like other equipment, I do use like power dots. Started using those more for like recovery, and then just certain like muscle stim on like an off day as well.
What are power dots?
Power dots, I I guess it's like comparable to like electro like EMS electromagnetic stimulation, sort of like a complex.
Do you have a Compex?
I do have a complex.
I do want to get a Compex. But now that I'm not training like a crazy person, or like at least competing, I don't really think it's there's any point. I want to get it. I know this is, I know the studies around it. Um, it's kind of like why have it? But I really want to get a Theragun. I just when I'm sore, yeah, when I'm sore, I just want to get like annihilated. You know what I mean? Not just for like, not because I'm like, oh, it's gonna like aid recovery. I just feel like you just want a massage.
It's like this tiny bit less annoying than having to do foam rolling. And I really wanted, I have one and I haven't used it in years. And then before my comp, I was like, oh, I'm going to get my massage gun, and I can't find a charger. So it's still charged, but I have no clue. I looked everywhere. I have no clue where my charger is. So I've probably had this for 3 years. I've moved a year ago. I haven't touched it once in the year where I have moved. So I don't think the purchase was super justified. However, in girl maths, I've used it for clients. So really, if you're looking at a massage that's at least like $90 and the massage gun is like 300, I already got my use out of it compared to a massage, but it is now collecting dust and I don't even know how to charge it. But in the other equipment, it was funny actually because I think the belt is kind of like, it's almost like you have to have it just to like strap yourself in. It's like a mental thing. But then when I did my squats without sleeves and belt, they were totally thrown out of the window. But then when I did my deadlifts, I was like, nah, I've got this deadlifts that I'm good at. And then I just did a PB without a belt that was higher than I've ever done before, which is crazy. It's a bit of a mental game, but I think equipment, especially knee sleeves, is something that there's not necessarily a whole lot of research that they will definitely help you, but they are giving your knees a little bit of comfort. And then one of my friends, who also did the powerlifting comp, she's never worn knee sleeves before, and she just got them for the comp. And I'm like, she used them in training a little bit, but anyway. And she's like, oh my gosh, it feels so different. I can like jump out of my squat, and I'm like, see, it's a placebo probably, but it does the thing. It works.
Yeah, I swear it adds at least 10 kilos to the lift.
Surely, right? When we look at adding weight to a lift and hitting a plateau, one of my favorite ways to overcome plateaus is probably adding pauses, especially for squats and deadlifts. And I think a pause deadlift is so highly underrated. And I have done pause deadlifts on my accessory days since my last comp. So since November, every accessory day I've done was pause deadlift. So I deadlift twice a week, one normal and one pause. And I think because I've done so much pause stuff, whenever I go into my normal deadlift day, I'm almost pausing, which helps me to get the bar off the floor, because the stickiest point in a deadlift is getting the bar off the floor, and it is below like knee. And I think the reason why I got like a quick math 12.5 kilo comp PB in the deadlift compared to any other lift is because I've done so much pausing. So I was like, Helen, I need pause squats. I need pause squats. I want to get my squat PB up as well. So I think like pause deadlifts is definitely something that's totally underrated, and they have helped me, and I'm really glad to have them back. But now I'm going to introduce some pause squats and see if that's going to help me with my overall squats as well. Any thoughts? Anything that you enjoy with pauses, or how you would utilize tempo and pause work?
I agree. I think tempo work, or just changing the tempo to whatever you're doing, like whether that's slowing down the eccentric, um, whatever that means. Maybe it's, again, pausing on the concentric. I think that's a great way to kind of switch a variable to break through a plateau, because that's all it really is. We don't need to overhaul and just like, change up the routine completely. It's just tiny tweaks, little variable here, little variable there, just to have the body make sure it's still learning.
Yep, pauses and tempo work is notorious in Olympic lifting. It's you probably do pauses in every single program actually, whether it be for your accessories or your prep work or your drills even. It'd be funny sometimes when you would see some of your drills and it would be say like two cleans, then two pulls, two cleans, and then two split jerks, but then within the cleans it would be like a pause at the half, like at the knees, and then sometimes there would be pauses from the hips, and then you would have to sit there, and it was almost like an equation, and you would sit there for a bit like trying to even process what you were about to do. It was almost like choreography to a certain point. And then if I was in a new block and it was a new equation or a new combo, the first week was always just like I'd put the bar down, I'm like I don't remember what the combo is anymore. And then my coach would just be like yelling, like just yelling across the room, like this, pause here, pause there. And I was like, how is anyone supposed to remember what they're supposed to be doing? But yeah, pausing is notorious just because just the nature of the sport is that you have to constantly achieve a 1% improvement in your lifts, like especially if you're competing a few times in the year. So you're always trying to push a PB so many times. So pausing it's saturated in programming in Olympic lifting.
So interesting. I never knew that about Olympic lifting, because I think I've just not really looked into it. But it makes sense because there's so many sticky points, and yeah, crazy.
Yeah, so many positions that you ideally want to hit within a matter of a second. So the potential areas where you can pause, there's so many. And yeah, like I've had ones where I'm pausing at every single position, like for a few reps per set, which is also really, really taxing. But obviously it produces results because then you can lift more.
Ouch, sounds painful.
Sounds like a stop motion production. Like,
The combos sound like me boxing. I can never remember. It was hilarious. Yesterday, I was meant to do my own combos, and I don't even know. I can't. My brain doesn't process this. I can do them sometimes when you shout them at me, but remembering them by myself, I don't know how I would ever be sparring, because I'm like left, right. That's all I've got. But yeah, the freestyle boxing combos, I'm like, oh god, I have a lot of work to do here. One of the last advanced training methods, and I have on my list here, is German volume training. And although I'm German, I've actually never done it. And it's not something that I would ever use in training, but it's probably more like a bro kind of thing, I feel like. Any thoughts, concerns? Have you done it before?
I did it once, maybe 5 years ago, and it's because it was when I was still PTing in the gym, and one of the PTs there, he was like, "Oh, come do an arm sesh with me," and I was like, "Yeah, all right, why not? Like, I'll come and do an arm sesh." And yeah, we were doing GVT for biceps, and I just remember I couldn't move my arms for a week, and I think even halfway through the sets, I was like, "I'm never doing arms. I'm never training with you ever again." It's so gross. Have you guys done it?
So for everyone that doesn't know, it's 10 sets of 10 reps, around like 60% of your 1RM, I think. And like 10 sets is a lot of volume, but GVT stands for volume training. So it is a lot. It's a lot of sets. How long did it take you to do the arm session?
We did it too. Yeah, it was a 2 hour session. Like it was in the middle of our morning and lunch clients, and he was like, "Yeah, come do an arm session." I was like, "Yeah, sure. Like that'll be fun." Um, no, it wasn't fun, and I couldn't move my arms for ages. And every time I saw him in the gym after for the rest of the week, I was like, "Joey, my arms are, I can't even hold my iPad. Like it's that bad." And he was like, "Yeah," and I was like, "That's why."
I think it'd be a really fun thing to do like once and then never again for a very long time, because I feel like the recovery on this and overtraining and injury risk, no, maybe not injury risk, but just recovery and then injury risk in following sessions might be quite high. And for the general person, it's probably very time consuming. If you're time limited, there's probably better ways.
I think definitely not doing anything like that and then just doing it like first off the bat, worst mistake ever. If you wanted to get to a stage where you could ramp yourself up to that stage, like I just think about how many blocks of 3 by 10, then like maybe 10 or 5 by 10, and then you just like that would take so long to ramp up to 10 by 10. I just feel, yeah, if you're really keen on doing GVT and you want to do it so that you don't destroy your arms for maybe a week, um maybe.
I did like right now I'm actually like looking it up to see if there's any other like specifics with this. So it's not just the 10 by 10, but it's also like every 5 days you're doing like 3 sessions. So that those 3 sessions repeat 6 times, 6 times in a month. So I could see how if you are getting the rest days. So I suppose if someone was maybe somewhat short on time, like they could maybe only train 4 days a week, this could be an option because they're just jamming a bunch of volume into those 4 days. It's for somebody out there, not me, not me, but somebody
Yeah, why German? Like, was it by a German? That'd be interesting.
um, German volume training. I'm actually not sure. I'm assuming it'd be something to do with the military or something.
Or like the Olympic team hacked a thing and they found out that 10 by 10 was the way to go.
Let me look it up. We're gonna discover this. It was founded in the mid 70s by Rolf Fieser. Rolf, it's the German pronunciation. He was a national coach of weightlifting, and if you're reading the name and thinking, ouch, that sounds about right. Thanks, Google.
So, like when you look at the actual programming, it doesn't actually look too bad. So it's like each day of those 3 days, you're doing 2 supersets. So for instance, like Monday would be chest and back, 10 sets of 10 bench press, 10 sets of 10 barbell row, and then second superset is standing cable chest fly, and then like lat pull down. I'm like that's not, and it isn't even the 10 by 10. It's like 3 by 10. So it's 2 supersets. The first superset is like the 10 by 10 by 10 by 10, and then it's like 3 by 10 for the, I guess, accessory work. That's actually not so bad. So basically, in like that one session, if you're like looking at like the sets,
So apparently it was used to gain mass, and it was an efficient way to train and gain mass to move up in a weight class. And it was done for weightlifting, Christine. So you should be all about this.
it doesn't actually seem so overwhelming. It's only like 26 sets a session.
But that's because you do about maybe 50 sets a session, okay? Context of your training.
But then, if I think about it, not that I will do it at 60%, but with my warm up sets, my top set, and my back off sets, I'm probably at 10 sets per exercise as well. But I'm not doing. But the German volume training be 10 sets of the top set.
Of the one thing.
Yeah. I think that pretty much wraps it up. Do you have any other methods that you use? Anything else you want to share? Any stories? Done. I think we leave it at the German volume training and we're like, nah, done, out.
If you do it, let us know.
Yeah. Yeah. And how you recover from it.
And are you eating a lot?
If you've got any German volume training insights and you want us to try it or program around it, would be a horrible idea, but we're here for it. If you want it, we will do it. maybe the next challenge. All right, team. Thank you so much for listening, and we're out. We're programming some German volume training.